You see that on the screen? You see that on the screen? All I got to say, this shit better be real.
What the fuck? What the fuck? No, 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 no.
This shit better, look at my face, better be real.
No, 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 no. This no, no, no. This not real. 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 No, 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 no.
What? What? I'm speechless.
I am speechless. No, I am speechless.
DBZ Space dropped the bombshell. Big bombshell.
Everybody has been wanting this card. Everyone.
We're talking about Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta and New Omega Shenron. Yes, new card stuff are coming. Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta and Shenron coming to global! Global!
Global, not JP, not Japanese. I know I said JP first. Japanese, I know some people use two different ones, whatever, to say the same thing. It's not Japanese Dokkan Battle leak. It's global.
This is real. Super Saiyan 4 go.
Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Oh, and it's a global leak.
I don't know. Yo, alright, calm down. Wow.
The month of August started the results of the first ever VS campaign, and as you already know, the Japanese version won. I guess they really wanted that pink shirt Vegeta trophy card, but the crazy thing is that it wasn't even that close. They won by almost 1 million points. Like, honestly, this might have just been rigged, because I can't see how one country can just beat the whole world. Maybe Dokkan wasn't as popular worldwide back then, or maybe the global players really wanted that Yamcha trophy card, so they intentionally lost, but I doubt it. At the same time, 2 new Dokkan Fests were teased, so a new dual Dokkan Fest was right around the corner, and those 2 new characters were none other than Omega Shenron and Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. The crazy thing is that both units were also teased on global, so that meant that this was going to be the first celebration ever to happen on both global and JP at the same time. They both came the next day and were the first units ever to lead categories. But before we dive into their kits, these guys were leaked a week prior. I guess back then they cared even less about data downloads. Like, I don't think they knew that people were able to data mine, or I don't know. But yeah, Omega and Gogeta were in the game files a week before the release. And from what I could gather, people were very hyped, obviously, but also kind of disappointed.
Honestly, I've been waiting so long for this guy, and he's not as good as I was expecting him to be. Not as good. Yes, he's fucking OP, he's amazing, but Super Saiyan 4 Goku is all that and a bag of chips, man.
I guess, I'm gonna be honest, guys. I am a little underwhelmed by Gogeta. He is really good. Gogeta is really, really good. But this is unnecessary. Like, over in a flash, like, I mean, sure, that'll help him, like, link better with, like, you know, Gogeta and Vegito Blue, because the Super Saiyan 4s, you know, without Over in a Flash or Fuse Fighter, they don't fit as well on a hero team, like, as the hero team used to be previously constructed, you know, with Vegito Blue, Gogeta, Gotenks, you know, etc. I'm just not that impressed with Gogeta's, I don't know, We'll see.
Like, we'll go over their kits in a minute, but there was like a huge uproar about Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta because some people made some quick calculations and it looked like Strength Super Saiyan 4 Goku had a higher APT than Gogeta, which obviously pissed like a lot of people off. He also didn't have the Saiyan Roar attack link, one of the best offensive link at the time, if not the best one.
I just saw someone say that he doesn't have Saiyan Roar, and yeah, that sucks. That actually hurts him quite a bit, because if he had Saiyan fucking Roar, like, and he's really a hero lead, like, if you had a rotation of Super Saiyan 4 Goku, Vegeta, and Gogeta, and they all were sharing, you know, Fierce Battle, Saiyan Roar, GT, Shocking Speed, Super Saiyan, like, that would just be a rotation of absolute insanity and death.
People really wanted Gogeta to be like the best unit in the game in every metric possible. Then that he clearly wasn't on paper with the information that we had at the time. People were only hoping that his leader skill would be his saving grace, as yes, their leader skills were actually missing at the time, but people just assumed that the leader skills were going to be added once they would officially be in game, but little did they know. Now as for their kits, both Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta and Omega Shenron gave Tricky and 150% HP attack and defense to their respective category, or Tricky and 50% HP attack and defense to their respective type. Very powerful leader skills obviously. Like going from Neo God's leader, this was quite a significant buff, like an additional 30% to all stat is nothing to laugh at. But obviously this was far from the biggest power curve jump in the game, as remember the jump going from gods to Neo Gods leaders was like a 50% buff to all stats, or even going from Gogeta to the gods leaders. This was probably the highest power curve buff the game had known to this day. Like going from 0 to 70% buff to all stats was just something else.
Oh, this is different. This is different. Hey, I like that. He does like a variation of kicks and attacks and punches. Now we do the super. Look at, wow. He has both Super Saiyan 4. I like, oh yes, 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 Bandai. That's what I want to see. That's what I'm talking about. That is a super attack. Now that rare thing. Oh, yo.
Tech Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta led the fusion category, a category that at first glance looked insanely OP. People were already making up teams with all the Gogetas and Vegetos in the game, but unfortunately that category didn't include the Podara fusions, only the Fusion Dance fusions, so as you probably guessed it, that category was extremely limited, especially on Global since they were still missing Int Gogeta, Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks and all the awakenings that came with him. And don't forget that this was before the same name update, so you couldn't run two characters with the same name on the same team. But I don't even know why I'm mentioning that since Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta didn't even have a leader skill on Global. I still don't even know how they got away with that, but yeah, Global players were mad. Like without his leader skill, this guy was literally just worse than every other Neo Gods leader in the game. Oh, and yeah, Tech Super Saiyan 3 Angel Goku wasn't even out on Global yet. So if you wanted to run Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, you had to run him under a God's leader. Just the shaft was crazy beyond belief, bro. Like, bro, I can't even fathom how mad I would have been at the time if I was playing Global. But yeah, Gogeta was still like a decent unit. He was a category leader after all. He greatly raised attack and defense on Super for one turn, meaning he could get pretty tanky post Super. Couple that with his 120% start of turn attack buff, and he was also doing some decent numbers. He also had a great chance of dodging and countering his enemy's super attacks. That's like more than twice the chance of the other Super Saiyan 4s. That ability alone probably pushed this guy to the best unit in the game contender. He also debuffed extreme class enemies attack and defense by 20%, an ability that people took for granted at the time, but as you'll see later, this might have just been the best part of his passive. As for his link set, well, like I said earlier, people didn't like the fact that he didn't have Saiyan War or Prepared for Battle, but outside of that, his link set was pretty decent. He had all the key links that would make him link well with the other fusion characters. Physical Omega Shenron led the Shadow Dragon Saga category, a category that was even more limited than the Fusion Dance category. It was crazy, but we'll go into more details when we'll talk about the Shadow Dragon Saga Super Battle Road stage that came not so long after. Omega Shenron was just like a more offensive version of Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. He greatly lowered defense on Super, had the same start of turn attack buff as Gogeta, but unlike Gogeta, he debuffed all enemies and not just the extreme class enemies, which was insanely valuable in Super Battle Road, as you'll see later on. But what made him better offensively was that additional attack that had a 10% chance of becoming a super attack. Something that doesn't look that impressive on paper, but the thing is, that guy had a phenomenal link set and a crazy linking partner being Physical Sin Shenron, whom he shared 6 links with. Something that was insane at the time. Like, one of the best link synergies we had at the time was Strength Super Saiyan 4 Goku with GT Super Saiyan 3 Goku, and they shared 5 links together. So yeah, that rotation was one of the strongest the game had known so far. Actually, some guy made an APT tier list around that time, ranking the hardest hidden units in the game, and Physical Omega Shenron was the 4th hardest hidden unit, just behind In Super Gogeta, LR Strength Broly, and LR In Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. So yeah, on paper that guy was insane. Now the question is, who was better, Gogeta or Omega? And the answer was simple, In Super Gogeta. Okay, no, but seriously, reading all those posts about the $200 million celebration just made me realize how much In Super Super Gogeta gapped the other TURs in the game at the time. Like, offensively, this guy was just a beast, and his team had the hardest hidden unit in the game. But jokes aside, I think that the general consensus at the time was that they were both very good, but Omega Shenron was like slightly better since he had like a higher APT, and that was pretty much all that mattered at the time. As for their banners, while on global they weren't great, but on JP, oh god, those banners were insane. Gogeta had all the fusions Dokkan Fest featured, meaning both Super Gogetas and Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks. Like, that alone made that banner insanely valuable, since in Super Gogeta was still seen by many players at the time as the best TUR, and physical Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks was still very good, definitely one of the strongest Neogods leader, and since his initial banner wasn't that great, I'm sure a lot of players skipped him on JP, and bro, even if you didn't pull the shiny new Neogods leaders, their old counterparts were still decent and definitely runnable on their Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta's new fusion team, especially if you were a new player. The banner also featured physical Super Saiyan Gotenks, who was one of the best regular SSR character at the time. But I saw some people debating whether it was worth it running him on Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta's team, since he didn't want to seal the enemy super so that Gogeta could counter them, but that conversation was over as soon as SBR was a thing, since that Gotenks was just a must there. Omega's banner was also pretty good. Like, sure, he didn't feature any of the units you would actually run under his first leader skill outside of like physical Shenron, his best linking partner, but it did feature some pretty decent extreme class units, like physical final form Cooler, Agel's per Cent Rose, and even though they were some of the weakest Neogods leaders, Agel's per 17 and In-Gate Boost still gapped like the rest of the game outside of like the other Neogods leaders and LRs. So yeah, that banner was good. Both banners also featured new SRs that could be Dokkan awakened into decent support type units, but well, only on JP. Those two units came in November for global. Physical GT's per Cent Goku was actually pretty decent. He raised all allies attack by 20% on Super and gave Tsuki and 25% attack to tech and physical type units on rotation. And the cool thing about him is that he shared 5 links with Tech's percent for Gogeta. So if you were fortunate enough to pull both Omega and Gogeta, you could run them both under Shenron's new leader skill, and they just worked so well together. But for the most part, this guy was actually just SA fodder for Strength GT's per Century Goku, who was an all-around just better unit. AGL Omega Shenron was also pretty good. He lowered the enemy's defense on Super and gave Tsuki and 25% attack to AGL and Tech type allies. But since he shared the same name as the new Dokkan Fest, you were almost never running this guy unless you didn't have his summonable counterpart, or if you want to run a mono AGL team. He actually was quite decent though on a mono AGL team. Like, he had the exact same link set as his Dokkan Fest counterpart, which was like a very good link set, but just like the other summonable SRs, this guy was mainly just SA fodder for the other Omega Shenrons. 4 days later, and it was already said in the news that the number of Dragon Stones acquired worldwide reached 200 million. So the special Hercule daily missions giving out 20 stones every day would end that very same day. So some very sad news for the people who got shafted. In the following days, Dokkan re-released upgraded versions of the support type units banners. Those banners now gave 2,800 potential orbs as well as an Elder Kuiper multi-summon. Like, that's insane. Oh, and also the units you would acquire on that banner were also going to be fully leveled up. It doesn't seem like much nowadays, but back then this was kind of a big deal, especially if you were a newer player. Like, resources weren't as scarce as the old days, but definitely more than today. The AGL Tech and Int type banners were pretty good, especially the Int one, since it had Int Super Sensu Gohan unfeatured, probably the best unit in the game at the time. As for the Strength type banner, it was actually the first ever Strength type support type banner, so it introduced 2 new support type units. Strength percent Kaba was decent, he raised his attack and defense by 30% for 3 turns on Super, probably one of the best super attack effect you could have at the time, and bro, he was Strength. So you already know the only thing people were thinking about is how he was going to juice up Super Saiyan 4 Goku to oblivion, which he did if you were lucky enough to pull him. Strength hit had a 20% chance of stunning the attacked enemy on Super for 2 turns, so actually not a bad super attack effect, but his link set didn't really work that well with the other extreme strength units though. At least the support he provided was enough for him to be decent enough on those teams, especially on LR Broly's World Tournament team. LR Broly, who was actually unfeatured on their banner by the way. They also at the same time awakened the Baba Shop support type units, and the crazy thing about them is that they were literally mono gods leaders, 3 gods leaders. They were also support type units. Obviously they still weren't as good since their stats, links, damage multipliers and overall kits were weaker, but still they were 3 units. Well, almost free. They were extremely expensive at the time. Like I already told you, each copy costed about 100,000 Baba points, which I think they lowered it at the time to like 70,000, but that was still very expensive. Nonetheless, they also announced a little login bonus campaign to celebrate the $200 million milestone, giving 2 stones every day for the duration of the campaign, as well as copies of the free farmable Bulma from the previous month. Oh, and the game also got top grossing, obviously. But weirdly enough, they didn't even give out stones, they just gave potential orbs. I'm not sure what the top grossing rules were at the time, but it looked like if top grossing was only achieved in one of the stores, they just didn't give out stones. Like for them to give out stones as top grossing rewards, Dokkan had to reach like top grossing in both the Android and Apple store. But I might be wrong, so if any of the OG knows, just let me know in the comments down below. At least they held another SNS campaign where players were able to get 1 Dragon Stone every day for the duration of the campaign. The next day we had the final type banner of the batch, the physical type banner, which I guess was a good one if you pulled Omega Shenron and needed some units to fill out his team. The only problem with that banner is that it was the only type banner at the time to not have like an LR unfeatured, since there was no physical premium LR at the time. 2 days later and it was time for the first ever legendary campaign. And let me tell you, that campaign was insane. If you were able to awaken LR Goku before the end of the campaign, so September 4th I think, you were rewarded 50 stones. And if you were able to raise his super attack to 20, you were given 10 Elder Kais. And if you were able to rainbow him, well, you were basically just refunded the orbs you spent on him. So essentially they were paying you to farm LR Goku, like literally paying you to farm him. That's crazy. And obviously they made things easier for you, or else anybody was going to farm this guy even for 50 stones. Like you guys know the history. So for the duration of the campaign, the tech type potential orb event was open every day. The stages of the Prime Battle Goku event had their stamina cost cut in half. They removed the 100 cost limit of strike events. They also cut in half the stamina cost of strike event stages, so it was actually your best time to farm them if you haven't already. They increased the character experience you would get from strike events, so you could generally level up characters there. They doubled the drop rates of strike events awakening medals and increased the drop rates of the strike event characters. And finally, all the extreme class strike event stages were now open from Friday to Saturday, and all of the super class strike event stages were open from Saturday to Sunday. So quite the campaign, as you can see. The next day they announced in the news that the 7th step of the Spirit Bomb event was achieved. And if you remember, it said something about sharing Dragon Stones with players. I thought that they were literally going to distribute 200 million Dragon Stones between the players, so that for example if the game had 10 million active players at the time, everyone would be rewarded 20 stones, but no, it just meant that the Hercule missions were going to be back soon, which was actually better than what I had in mind. But unfortunately, I'm pretty sure the discounts on the worldwide banners were already over. In any case, 20 stones every day is 20 stones every day. At the same time, the global side of the game achieved top grossing in like 7 different countries, so they gave 50 stones to everyone. So yeah, I guess at the time top grossing rewards during Worldwide Celebration were shared between both versions. 3 days later, they dropped a new LR, the second LR to be featured on his own legendary summon banner. And yeah, just like Broly's banner, it wasn't great, but I guess was still better since the unfeatured pool had more LRs. As for LR's percent Trunks, well, he was like the other LRs, phenomenal. He had the same mechanic as LR Zamasu and Rose, meaning he raised his defense by 30% for 3 turns on his 12 and 18 key super attacks, a mechanic that was very strong on LRs due to their very high base stats. He also had an insane 120% start of turn attack buff and a high chance of performing a critical hit, the first unit ever to gain crit chance outside of the hidden potential system. So this was actually one of the only units in the game where his optimal potential system build was to go full additionals, and his link set was also very good. He shared 4 links with essentially the best unit in the game, and he was himself definitely a top 5 unit in the game. So this was just the best rotation in the game. But the only team where you could actually run these 2 guys together at the time was Physical Vegito Blue's team, a 50% chance to all stats type of team. So you couldn't really see the full potential of that rotation yet, but don't worry, their time will come very soon. LR Trunks also came with 2 new awakenings. HL Zeno Super Saiyan Trunks was actually not bad. He raised his attack by 50% on Super for 6 turns and had 2 key and 80% attack at the start of turn. He was definitely a good option on a mono HL team. It's just that his link set wasn't the best. Like his best linking partner to this day is LR Trunks. That just tells you how niche it was. Also, fun fact about this guy, but I think he's one of the only units in the game to get a worse leader skill buff upon awakening. Like his leader skill used to give 50% attack, but now it only gave 40%. Like obviously his leader skill was still better now due to the key and other stats that came with it, but still, it's a thing worth pointing out. Tech GT's percent trunk was also pretty good. He raised his defense by 30% for 6 turns on super, and gave 2 key and 25% attack and defense to tech and strength type allies. Couple that with his not so bad link set, and you could generally run him on tech's percent for Gogeta's team, under Gogeta's second leader skill. A week later, and it was announced in the news that the Hercule missions would end that very same day. It's actually crazy when you think about the amount of stones that event gave. Like I think they easily gave out like 200 plus stones just for that event alone. Anyways, at the same time, they released a new story event with 2 new free-to-play units and increased drop rates if you bought characters from the fusion category. The first story events were released with increased drop rates. Like sure, the category was extremely limited, but still it was better than nothing. As for the new free-to-play units, AGL Tarble was actually not bad. He raised the allies attack by 20% for 1 turn on super, had a 20% start of turn attack buff, and changed strength key spheres to AGL. So just for that he had some value. Like a free-to-play orb changer was a pretty cool thing to have, especially in the world tournament, if you had like LR Majin Vegeta who needed a lot of ki to hit his AoE super attack. Int Gotenks was also not bad. He was a sub-leader for the fusion category, or actually not even a sub-leader, that's like a sub-leader skill. Like 2 ki and 20% HP and defense, like no attack. Like there was no way in hell you were running this guy as a sub-leader if you had like any of the other rainbow leaders. But nonetheless, he had like a supreme damage multiplier and 50% attack and defense on super. So not a bad free-to-play card, but mainly just SF fodder for the other better Gotenkses. They also brought back the fusion banner, I guess to help out Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, with 2 new fusion units and the fusion story event with a new Dokkan Awakening. Barlot was actually not bad. He greatly raised his attack for 1 turn on super and gained 50% attack and defense per key spheres obtained. So a very decent nuker that could hit very hard with a couple of key spheres. And bro, the fusion category was so limited. This guy was genuinely one of the best options you had there. In Salza was okay, I guess. Like he had 70% attack and defense at the start of turn, with a high chance of gaining an additional 30% attack and an additional high chance of recovering 10% HP at the start of turn. But the problem was his link set. He had a mix of Cell and Frieza links, so he could share 2 to 3 links next to Frieza or Cell. But you couldn't really get the best out of him on a team solely focused around Frieza or Cell. He still wasn't bad though, just nothing that could actually help out the current teams in the game, and more of just like a fun filler unit. Physical Weirus on the other hand was much better. Like he was a double orb changer, a very powerful ability, since it meant that this guy was actually like a consistent orb changer. Like if you had him on rotation, you were guaranteed to be able to pick up a bunch of physical key spheres. He also had 50% attack and defense at the start of turn. Not the best buff, but not the worst either. And sure, his link set was 1 key, but you could still run him on Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta's team, since he had Shock and Speed and Fused Fighter. So he literally had 4 key next to Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. They also brought back the Logan bonus Tekka card if you missed him. Like he wasn't good, but a cool trophy card to have, I guess. They also held another Shenron Wishes Twitter campaign, where people could vote for a wish. I'm pretty sure the wishes were the same as the last time, so Zenny statues, potential orbs, hourglass medals, and I guess copies of the Twitter Frieza. 4 days later, and they showed the results of the campaign. Obviously, the option that had the most amount of votes was the potential orb 1, so just like last time. So they gave everyone 2,525 potential orbs. 2 days later, and the next Dokkan Fest was teased in the news, a new Ultimate Gohan, which also meant a new category.